a credit union is run by volunteers, that we have a volunteer board of directors, where a bank has corporators and trustees. If you have a $5 member account, then you are basically an owner of the credit union. You have a right to vote at meetings and so on and so forth. Whereas a bank, you're just a customer. So you actually take ownership of the credit union by becoming a member of the credit union.
Okay, welcome to the Selectmen's Board meeting, Monday, June 16th, 2014. Can we all stand and pledge allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are waiting for Mr. Pepe to get here, but we figure we'll start, so seeing the air conditioning's working so good.
Yeah, I can go along with that. We're gonna skip over the fish and game lease for right now. We're gonna go to the discussion for the FY 2015 Spencer budget update.
Mr. Chairman, just to bring you up to speed on this, we attended a school committee meeting. They have adjusted their budget. We do have the special meeting on June 24th at 7 p.m., special town meeting.
26th.
26th, rather.
Yeah.
So there'll be, the only article we're faced with, I think, is one article dealing with fiscal year 2015 assessment, Spencer East Brookfield. So the total budget is reduced. Obviously, the town, we don't have the money to offset it, but I can tell you this, it's not $538,000 anymore, and we have worked it down. The town,
190,000 less. 189 something.
yeah, depending, no, it went down by that, but, you know, the town administrator worked very hard to get that down, so I just want everybody to know, I think the warrant is on the website if as of now, right?
Yes.
So,
And I think there's a copy here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gary's got it.
so we do have that, there'll be one article, and hopefully we can move forward from this point on. It's been a long fight, I think it's time that we finally settle that one. We did it last year by using free cash, so I think it's important that everybody understands we've done everything we can, and this will be the outcome. So just please, if you have any questions, you can look on the website, it is on there, and you can, if you have any questions, feel free to contact the administrator. However, he won't be in this week. So that's where we stand on that one. Sounds like pitter-patter.
Yep.
See? So that's where we stand on that. Good evening, Mr. Pepe.
Good evening. Last meeting.
Oh, we did, just,
We skipped over that.
brought that up, one article, June 26th, so we discussed that. We do have a public hearing. I think we should table it.
All right, so we'll, pardon my tardiness, another meeting ran over. So, you want to, before the public hearing, let's quickly discuss what we want to do with the fish and game lease for the senior center, council on aging. We had a rewrite of the lease at the fish and game. Did everyone get a chance to read that and the changes associated with it? There's a few changes. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just to bring it up to speed on this, we actually leased that hall Monday through Friday, is what the lease was. They want to change it Monday through Thursday. I did speak to the people down there, I also spoke to the director. We do have an issue because there's events that take place on Friday morning.
All right.
So that's an issue. The other issues are that they want to utilize the pavilion during the center hours. I'm just concerned about parking, and I haven't had a chance to really go over all that, but there's quite a few changes in here. I know when I checked with the fire department, their training takes place after hours, so that shouldn't be an issue. That being said, I know that the director had some concerns, so I don't know if the board wants to invite her or maybe have her get the concerns to Adam, what her concerns are.
When we delay decision on this lease and get our feedback to Adam and let him speak to the director and determine whether, we want to have her at the meeting, if that's necessary, or whatever, however Adam wants to handle it. Just tell him we have an issue with the changes to the lease specifically. I was concerned that the Friday would be a concern.
Yeah, and, just so you know, I know it's the same money as when we were on Wall Street. Ironically, because I'm knee-deep in that end of it. I'm constantly down there moving equipment around and hiding it in an office so they can utilize for function. I don't have an issue with that. But I do know that the other place we had was 24/7, so if you break down the hours versus what the other one was. So I think there's some movement probably on both sides.
Okay.
So just to bring you up to speed on that.
Mr. Chair, do we have, isn't there an issue, though, with the date of this lease? How could we be delaying it to a later meeting in June? This effective date here of June 30th, don't we need to resolve this before the start of the new fiscal year?
I don't, leave that to Tony, but I don't think that's an issue other than, this is an open line of communication between the administrator and their board.
Yeah, I think there's flexibility with the Fish and Game, and
That's okay with me, I thought we had to vote on it and, sign it so it's executed before the 30th of the month?
I'll communicate to the administrator on his vacation and tell him there was issues this evening and find out what, if that's an issue or not, and get back to the board. Okay.
If it's, I would just volunteer to come in if it's a matter of, getting a quorum and voting on this contract, if maybe we relay our concerns to Adam via email and he takes them up, and if we have to have it resolved before the 30th, I could come in the morning like we did last week as long as we can get a quorum to approve. Okay, but.
Yeah, again, we've got to vote on this at a regular meeting.
Right.
So,
Okay.
I'll communicate this to Adam and tell him the flexibility of the board to have another meeting to work this out and get a vote on it.
I'll give you copies.
Okay. Okay? So we'll defer this. I'll get a date back to you folks and we communicate to Adam.
Thank you.
All right.
Update the calendar, let them know that it was summer hours, and then we're gonna be from this point to this point, we'll be Wednesday.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we've been working on our meeting calendar, and because of the educational requirements that were given to the administrator, he needs to attend some classes on some Monday nights. So he's asked the board that after a certain date, if we could change the schedule of our meetings just to the day of the week. And the changes will be starting in September. We will be meeting on Wednesdays from September 10th to the 26th of November. And those dates will be September 10th, September 24th, October 15th, October 29th, November 12th, and November 26th. And we will also be changing workshops to those Wednesday nights as well. Those dates are September 17th, October 22nd, and November 19th. And these will be reflected in the calendars for the town. Okay, we've got a few minutes before. Start early? No? Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess. We want to start the public hearing on time. Welcome back. It's now 6:30. We'd like to open a public forum on the workshop of the CDBG Downtown Property Assessment Project. So I'd like to open a public hearing at at 6:30. Okay, so we have a project underway to look at opportunities for revitalizing downtown. So we have some representatives from the CDBG here. If you could introduce yourselves for our audience, appreciate it.
Right, okay. I'm Brian Barber, the project director, and with me is Bill Giesentanner and Lisa Davis and Dan Benoit. But I think first Michelle from the town is going to introduce the project.
Okay, I had just got the agenda, so
Sure.
Michelle, go right ahead.
Sure, should I just stand here?
Sure.
I'm just giving a very brief introduction. Basically, this public forum is regarding a community development block grant that the town received to do a project called the Property Assessment and Reuse Planning Project. Basically, it's a detailed assessment of 50 to 60 buildings in the downtown area. The grant was roughly $80,000, and it's being managed by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission with sub-consultants as well. And then we already did the introduction, so with that, I'll turn it over to Ford presentation.
Great.
I call your attention to the, one of the handouts that we've given you, which is called Spencer Revitalization Study Getting Underway. And that is a brief description of the project. So this was an article that appeared in the New Leader on Friday. But it's very comprehensive and gives a very nice description of project intentions. And we have a brief PowerPoint presentation to further introduce you to the material. And then we want to spend a little time talking about the schedule. And then finally, we want to open it up to the real meat of the project of our meeting tonight, which is discussions of the hopes for the town center, discussions of change actions that are likely to be supported, and identification of specific properties for rehabbing or redevelopment. And that's where we really, really need the input of the community. And Bill Giesentanner is going to run through our PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so just reiterating the introduction of the key players here on the team.
You'll see this at the overhead, or can we flick the lights?
Up there
Up
was,
the top, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Just shut one section.
There we go. That's better.
so this is the study area as it's defined. Generally, and I think we've handed out a map that shows that as well. It's basically the downtown area. The goals of the project is to make improvements to the downtown, accommodate future growth, have a downtown that Spencer and its citizens can be proud of, and help create conditions for private actions. This is sort of following on two studies that were done earlier, one in 2009, the Spencer Town Center Revitalization Planning Project, and in 2013, the Spencer Downtown Housing Study. It's also following on a lot of infrastructure upgrades that the town is engaged in, has completed, and has in the pipeline, so to speak. So I'm not going to read through these, but there's quite a number, including the renovations and improvements that have been done here at the town hall. And still recently completed water infrastructure and street improvements. And then several that are in the pipeline that are scheduled for the next few years. Mechanic Street reconstruction, pedestrian improvements, Adams and Clark Street reconstruction, roadway reclamation project at McDonald and Sharon, and Main Street reconstruction. The total investment that the town has made and got in the pipeline is more than $16.8 million. So what's going to happen during this project? We're going to do a physical inventory, a detailed physical inventory and assessment of approximately 50 to 60 properties. Those properties are being selected by the town, by Adam and Michelle, with some input from Pioneer Valley Regional Planning. And so they'll be looked at intensively. There's also site and regulatory assessments that will be parallel to that, looking at infrastructure needs, ownership, zoning, environmental constraints. There's a whole series of information sources that we'll be using, including the town leaders, the assessor's records, on-the-street architectural assessment. Dan Benoit will be primarily doing the architectural assessment. Prior studies, some of which I've mentioned, realtors who have experience working in the town or who work with developers, banks, local, as well as some of the regional banks that might be interested in doing some incentive loan programs, state inventories like Mass GIS and DEP, Registry of Deeds, and you all tonight. Develop reuse recommendations is where we will be later on in the project. Those might be real estate market assessment, and Lisa Davis will be working on parts of that, as well as some of the reuse options that we'll be sort of proposing. Could be rehabbing existing structures, could be changing use, could be mixed uses, could be tear down and build new, tear down and reuse the lot for open space or parking, or other things. Some of the implementation tools that may be recommended as the study goes on are regulatory changes, things like building code issues or zoning board of appeals or zoning issues, tax incentives, things that might stimulate private investment, loan programs, property owner training programs, private-public development corporations, trying to interest some of the developers, some of them nonprofit in the region that have already expressed some interest, and then others. So the implementation plan will recommend reuse strategies for individual or packages of properties. In some cases, there may be a group of properties that make sense for a developer to handle as a group. So that would be a package of properties. Strategies for owners and residents, rehabilitation, reuse, rebuilding recommendations, recommended regulatory changes, and recommended financial programs. So the schedule is basically to do the inventory and physical assessment work June, July, and August. The state and regulatory assessment, site and regulatory assessment will also be June, July, and August. Reuse recommendations will be August and September, and they'll be presented at another public meeting, another public workshop like this in September. The implementation plan will be prepared during August, September, October, and a final report will be prepared in October and November and presented at a November workshop like this. And then that last month of December is just sort of cleaning things up and getting a final report with the input from that final public meeting. So that's the PowerPoint.
Right, and I want to leave the schedule up on the wall for a minute or two to see if you got any kind of reaction to that. The grant is over at the end of the calendar year, December 31. which is why we've shown that in that time frame. And as Bill says, December will be a kind of cleanup month to make sure that everything is done according to your needs and what the state needs out of this. But the beef of the project is really the recommendations on how to take each project, each property, and come up with a reasonable program of implementation. And as Bill outlined, there's a number of possibilities for any given property. And there's a number of financing possibilities for that. And it's our job to make the recommendations on how that should get packaged, and then to try and work with owners to see how their level of interest in carrying this thing out. As in any implementation program, the owners are key. You've got to work with them, and they've got to agree to the program. And we're not sure, how that's going to work, and how we're going to overcome some of the problems. We've been told, for example, that you've got some absentee ownership, meaning people who own property here that might live in Dallas, Texas, or some other parts of the country, and as well as absentee landlords for residential property. That's been a common kind of thing where people from Boston or Worcester come out and buy properties and put minimal amounts of investment into them, find tenants, and then kind of disappear. So those are the kinds of situations we're going to have to deal with. And the other thing that I'd like to leave you with is that the inspections, the physical inspections, are all going to be from the outside. We don't plan to go inside any of the properties unless invited in. I mean, in a unique situation, an owner might say, look, I'm really desperate. Why don't you come on in and take a look, in which case we would certainly take that invitation. Dan Benoit from Benoit Design in Worcester will be doing the inspections, and he's got a track record on this, doing them for some redevelopment projects, and Dan's got a checklist of things to look at. And Dan, you might just want to say a few words about what you look at when you do an inspection.
Right, well, I'll be, like you said, mainly, observing from the outside, but I'll be looking at foundations for cracks, siding, wear and tear, chimneys, that type of thing, and then just doing, based on percentages and number of incidences, if you will, of those types of events on a property, looking at site assessment, parking, that kind of thing, vacancy. So it's a list that was developed actually for redevelopment authorities when observing properties. I've used it in the past, and it's quite thorough and works for this type of project.
Okay, and Lisa's job on the project will be to look at the financial opportunities that might be available for a given project. So Lisa's a specialist in real estate development. And as I mentioned, each property needs to have a special assessment and hand-picking those items that are most appropriate in terms of loan programs, tax write-offs, or any kinds of other incentives that might be there to get a property owner to improve the property. Lisa's worked in a number of communities doing this kind of thing, and as I say, is a specialist in real estate. A member of our team we haven't mentioned yet is Kathy Bagdonis in the back, Kathy will help us with public participation, and Kathy is also a specialist in data entry for large databases. And this project will indeed have a very large database per property. Bill showed you the tax assessor's records, which are kind of starting point, but there's many other pieces of information that will be put into an extensive database that will be compatible with town software so that it can be readily accessed here in Town Hall. And we'll be using it to make our recommendations, but you can be using it for other purposes as well. Bill is our database specialist. You might want to say a few words about fitting this into GIS.
Basically, we'll be starting with Mass GIS's assessors level 3 data, which has a huge spreadsheet based on the assessor's records that most towns have. It includes square footage and condition of buildings sometimes, and a whole host of stuff. But then we'll also be adding to that additional columns with Dan's information and other information that we think might be appropriate to individual properties. It'll all be able to be accessed through GIS software, but it'll also be, you can take the same table that's in what's called attributes for the GIS software and break those off as Excel spreadsheets. So they're readily compatible and viewable by anybody with Excel.
We wanted to mention a few words about the project publicity. In a project like this, it's important that people in town know about it and don't become alarmed by people walking around with notebooks and you know, they're not threatening. and I know sometimes you get into some neighborhoods where they like their secrets and they don't want you finding out anything that they don't want you to know about. But certainly the condition of buildings is near and dear to the heart of owners and tenants and town officials. So as long as people understand that this is a benign exercise, if you will, in that sense that it's not threatening to anybody. It's designed to help the property owner make some decisions and take some actions that the professionals on the team feel are most suitable for improving the property. And we will probably also be able to tell you something about the timelines for improving property. That is, whether it's something that should be done immediately, or whether it's something that you know, can be started in another 6 months, and how long, you know, such improvements might take. But we will be looking to Adam and Michelle in the town, and we've already spoken with Steve Tyler about the objectives of the project and any help they can give us in publicizing it, letting people know about it, following up on this article that appeared in the New Leader. We'd like to have maybe one a month coming along, and we will be posting progress on your town's website. So people will be able to if they're, you know, really interested, follow the progress of the project. And although this kind of project it's similar to a lot of other projects, planning projects, ain't over till it's over. Meaning you've got to have all the information in your hands before you make a final set of recommendations, and it's got to be balanced out. So we wouldn't be making recommendations up front that we're still under consideration or still having information added to it in our process. But we do expect to be able to use the town website for information, and it would be excellent if we could set it up so that it was iterative, two-way, so people could post comments on it that would get back to us and maybe help with our direction. Dan will be the primary person in town, although all of us will be here at one time or another, speaking with people, looking into the town records, some things like deeds and talking to bankers and whatever. So we will be around. We thought of wearing uniforms, but I think that would be overkill. Anyway, what we'd really like to do is get to the discussion of hopes for the town center and get people's comments on change actions that are likely to be supported. I mean, here, we can get quite specific. How willing are people to entertain the notion of property demolition? Or is that something that's highly controversial and doesn't have much public support? We don't know. We have to find out about that. And then finally, identification of your identification of some specific properties for rehab and redevelopment. And that will help Michelle and Adam to identify and finalize this list of 50 to 60 properties. We need a list of at least 10 to 20 right now to get Dan started, because we'd like to be able to do the inventory within that 3-month time frame that we've set out there. So why don't I just open the floor for discussion of hopes for the town center. I know maybe we can get the lights back on so people can see a little better. You've had 2 studies here now recently, the town center plan and the housing study. Both have indicated actions and projects and sub-projects that they thought would be supportive of a town center, or improved town center. Does anybody have any comments about? Yeah, go ahead.
Brian, I just want to jump in. Andrew Love from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which is helping the town implement the planning project. Bill Scanlon, who's working with PVPC, will be the project lead for us. He was unable to be here tonight, but I'm here. I did help the town write the grant application that's funding this project. And I just wanted to reemphasize a point that Bill and Brian went over a bit earlier, which is really what makes this different from the previous planning effort in the town center a few years ago, is that this is really a site-specific planning project. It's once the town and folks here tonight have helped us to identify these 50 or 60 top priority properties that might need rehabilitation or are underutilized or are vacant, then folks from CPA and their partners will be looking at these properties individually, very comprehensively, to see first, what any problems are of the properties, what they could be reused for, and then to lay out specific programs and specific implementation activities on a project or a site-by-site basis, rather than this more strategic, higher level planning effort, which was done under the revitalization plan back a few years ago. So this is, again, it's really focused on specific properties and what people envision for those. And certainly you can touch on broader issues in the downtown if that's what you'd like to do. But again, this plan will be really parcel by parcel and doing outreach to the property owners to see what they'd like to do with the property. Can resources be found to to help them do that, or are there cases where maybe the town could step in and help more directly?
Andrew, maybe we could, oh, here we have a comment, okay?
Well, I just have a question. According to the document that you handed out, funding for the assessment or the study comes from a grant.
It does.
Where's the money for the actual
The
targeted
implementation.
improvements come?
Well, that's what the consulting team will be helping to develop, is an implementation plan for each property, or again, as perhaps properties bundled together where the conditions are all very similar.
Yeah,
And
there
and
might
that's
be,
the next step.
there might be some public grant money available for some of the properties, but probably for the bulk of the properties, it will be a combination of private financing with maybe some town incentives in there, like a tax relief or something like that to get something going. Or maybe a public-private partnership where the town agrees to make some infrastructure improvements, like sidewalk improvements or street lighting or whatever that will benefit the property owner.
Does the scope of the project include anything revolving eminent domain or any of the owned properties? Does it include mandates for business owners on Main Street? What's the scope really gonna include?
I don't think that any mandates for businesses are being discussed through this. You know, eminent domain, that's a long-term process. This planning process has nothing to do with eminent domain. It could lay that out as an option for the town for very stubborn sites, but I don't think that that's something that we would take on
Yeah,
lightly
no,
or without substantial input from everyone.
Eminent domain is normally used in a larger scale project where there's a number of properties that should be taken and then completely new development proposal made for those properties en masse, maybe even changing the property boundaries and having, land consolidation. But eminent domain is not something that is on the radar screen right now.
Okay, so Dan, question for you. The thing that we were looking at your business earlier today,
Yes.
that had parking lots and things like that. Is that not in the scope of this discussion?
A possible parking reuse would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But, that would provide income for somebody, a property owner, and so we would evaluate it as an income producing property.
If I could just jump in, I don't want to monopolize things at all here, but I should say that through this same grant that's funding this project, the town does have a housing rehab program that I know the selectmen are aware of. It's been ongoing for several years. I believe the town intends to plan for additional funding in the next grant round as well. That's a program so that moderate and low-income homeowners can get funding to do repairs to bring their home up to code. It's available to single-family homeowners, but also can be used at apartments. So that's, if you're interested, anyone's interested who has a residential property, I think they could contact Michelle for more information. And then I think there's also a little bit of information on the town's website right now. But again, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission administers that for the town. So if you're interested, just afterward, just let me know and I can send you information directly.
So last question, and then I'll let somebody else take over. The funding, what amount is being provided for funding to do the assessment?
This planning project, I think it's about $79,000
To do the assessment?
to do, yes.
Is that right? About 50 or 60.
Over a course of how many months?
6 to 12, 7 months. With our slack month of December thrown in.
With how many resources to do that?
And how many what?
How many resources, how many project managers, assessment people?
Oh, our team is 5 people.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a question here.
Couple comments and a question. First of all, my name is James Whalen, lead School Street. For the record, I'm the chairman of the town's planning board. First of all, thank you for coming in here and joining us to the revitalization plan for the downtown. This has actually been an item on the minds and the agendas of the planning board the past couple of years. I want to go back about, say, almost a year and a half, almost 2 years now. The CMRPC, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, had come to us asking us for a wish list of things that we were looking towards doing. And some of what you talk about is on that list. We were looking, especially in the commercialization of the town center. We're looking at doing a facade program as one of 13 items that come up. I'm not sure what happened to this program. If you do, I would love to know if you know anything that I don't at this point, because I've been finding that I don't know a whole lot kind of going into this. Let's see, in particular for kind of hopes for the town center, you pointed to the studies that were done recently that the planning board had received copies of. I think that'd be a great place to start for all you guys. That'd be a great place to start looking at. And anyone else who would like to know, I believe the copies are still available. I might even have copies in my office back in my house. The only question I would like to comment on is this. Because I feel like I've been kept in the dark about this a little bit, and so has the rest of the planning board, at what point will permits be applied for improvements to any property? Because when you talked about some large-scale development being done, maybe some little type of things here and there, depending on what the property owner wants to do or whatever you find your assessment to be, where on that schedule do you think you would be doing that, and for what purposes would you apply for anything? Thank you.
Yeah, well, the permit application phase won't come until you've got an agreement with the owner. The owner has to make the application. And, once an owner agrees that they like your recommendation and they like the financial package that you're recommending for it, they can then go for a permit. But they don't want to do it prematurely, because
I understand, yeah.
as you know, financing is a tricky business, and sometimes agreements don't, they expire.
So you say it'll be kind of on an as-needed ad hoc basis?
Yeah,
as things come up? Okay.
And I would anticipate that for most properties, that wouldn't occur until virtually the end of the project, because,
Okay.
as I mentioned before, it ain't over till it's over. We're still looking at things and hearing from people and talking to other people about the final recommendations to be made. But in this process, we really want to engage property owners. And that's the key to getting them on board and getting them to actually want to go for a permit.
Thank you.
I just have a question for a lot of people here. Parking, is parking gonna be stopped, or is it gonna be improved? Because that's the biggest thing for downtown people, downtown business, get parking. If you're gonna get rid of parking,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Well, parking is a candidate use for some of the properties. I mean, let's say you've got a key property next to some commercial uses, and the building is in pretty poor shape, and you can show financially that the building would do better as a parking lot, a private parking lot with revenue coming in that way. So in that sense, yes, but on-street parking, the study would not be dealing with that, but you've got the downtown study of 2009 that had parking recommendations, and the parking needs to be coordinated with the rest of the development, there's no question about that. And it has to be a combination of on-street, off-street, so that you've got, enough capacity in there. And the town may want to, consider ways of increasing its own revenues or becoming a property owner of creating a public parking lot. That's done too. And it's possible that maybe some of these properties would be candidates for that, to be bought by the town and turned into a public parking lot.
Paid public parking.
Paid public parking. Right.
Not free public parking.
One right behind you.
Ron,
Hi, Alex McNitt, I'm with the Chamber of Central Mass South. I want to try to circle back to what I think you started with as your question, which was, your goal is to leave here with at least a dozen or so properties identified that you can start your assessment with. So I don't know the town as well as I'd like to, but two pop to mind immediately. One would be the former Chevrolet dealership up Route 9 a little ways. It's an awful lot of space. It's could use a new vitalization. And then there's a building that is, I think it's Wall Street, that's directly across from Barnstorm Motorcycles, that is maybe shouldn't even be standing anymore, from what I understand. I'm not sure if that's the case, but probably should have some sort of an assessment done on that one, so. There are two.
Sad's building.
Okay, sad.
Two different things, Flex Con, Plant One,
Yeah, but that's in good shape. Sad's is ready to go out.
which could be the other one, the bond.
The old workshop.
Plus, the building is in good shape, so.
Just, if I could just jump in for 1 minute, just to clarify, because I think we're confusing two different issues. The downtown study, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, is different than when we talk about parking. The realignment of Pleasant Street, that's a separate than what we're discussing here. This is to come up with distressed property that maybe needs a little bit of help. If they could come up with maybe 10, 20 different properties that highlight, so it's two different things, so
That's correct.
so, I just don't want to confuse the two
Right.
issues.
Yeah, no, and my point was that you do need to, parking is a central, critical issue for all downtown development. And if you're going to be doing some public lots, all street needs to be coordinated with what you've got going on street as well.
Another question back here.
Yeah, I wanted a little bit more clarification. You talk about 50, 60 properties. I saw the area, it's pretty large, so there are a lot of properties in the area you're considering. Is it 50, 60 properties, is it a limitation that you have right now? Because you cannot process more? And what are the criteria that you're going to consider? Is it vacant, property in poor condition? Is it a specific use, or how are you going to prioritize these properties?
Okay, we've been provided with several lists of properties, and for the most part, they're what you would call distressed in some way or another. Either got physical problems, or access problems, and some of them just need some paint, but nevertheless, they're eyesores in the neighborhood.
The vast majority of properties in the study area are fine. Their only problem is that they may be next door to a distressed property. And that's what we're focusing on, is how do we bring the overall character of the area up, rather than having it go down.
If I could interject, did Michelle and Adam start a list for these folks? Have we started a list from our perspective?
I think Adam had some preliminary ideas, and he and I are supposed to be discussing narrowing that down a bit. With him away, I'm gonna have to meet with other staff people to try to assist them in narrowing down.
If I could jump in a little, Michelle. For the grant application that funded this project, there was a preliminary list of about 100 properties that was put together. That was largely taken from the assessor's office, so it was properties that were significantly in arrears on the property taxes, or foreclosed properties, vacant properties. There was some input from the fire department, those red X buildings that the fire department won't go in because they're in such poor condition. Buildings along those lines. So we put this whole list together, and the intention here is that, as we start getting a little input from folks here who may know specific properties that were on that preliminary list, or not, maybe even new properties, then Michelle and Adam and the other members of the Community Development Advisory Group would call that down into a more manageable number that the consulting team can integrate. That's this 50 to 60 properties that they can pull into this plan by the end of the year. So we have a broader list of properties now. Some of them really, honestly, aren't that bad. They might have just been a couple of quarters in arrears on property tax. But that's, it's gonna be kind of a back and forth between the consulting team and the town, to, identify which ones still, could use some rehabilitation and which ones, don't need it anymore. And that's part of the way that the list will get whittled down. So you mentioned criteria. I guess I broadly mentioned what some of the criteria are. But, we're also looking for input on what folks who, live and work in the downtown, think are important criteria. And that's, again, what the town and the consultant team will use to get to this working list of 50 to 60.
If I may follow up with another question. The scope of the project is to find a solution for those 50, 60 properties, or come up with a plan that, if implemented, will impact the entire neighborhood?
It's a little as you were just saying,
We
right?
pretty much
Yeah.
think that if we can even get 5 or 6 properties to make improvements, that the overall area will begin to be improved. Right now, people are seeing, I think, things go the other direction. And so we're really wanting to focus on a few, and of the 50 to 60, there may be 5 or 10 that are prime. The owners are interested, the financing is gonna be relatively easy, the incentives don't have to, we'll try to, the best thing is results. So you try to pick the low-hanging fruit, and then the tougher stuff will follow because success has already happened.
And it will be related to the existing plans, to the extent that, we've read them, we understand them, we know what kinds of objectives there are for the town, and then what specific kinds of projects have been proposed. And so the contributions of these properties to implementing that plan will certainly be noted, and would be expected to be, to lead to better success with the plan. So the two, are certainly integrated in our thinking. Although you wouldn't call what we're coming up with as an independent plan by itself. It's really a set of implementation actions.
Another question?
Yeah, I'm Mark Andrews from town. I own a property on Main Street. It's vacant now. There was a business there for 20-something years, and they just downsized, and that's fine. But first question I'm getting from prospective people are, where do we park? It's a great question. And I think the town bought a building next to the post office to provide parking to the post office. Is that true or not true?
It is.
Years ago, okay, it's good idea. And that provided 20 spots maybe, whatever, great idea. Well, for Main Street, I think we have to think in a similar way. People need to park. And there's a lot of, properties in distress right on Main Street. And it'd be great to put new facades and a lot of things, but if they're beyond help, it might just make sense to drop them and tar them and provide parking. We need parking. I don't know, maybe there's other studies of different towns and redevelopment that you don't need parking, but that's what every business, I've had 7 contact me, and parking is number 1. And then energy, how energy efficient and so forth and so on, so. If that helps, it doesn't help, but if, I just drop them and tar them. Easily said, but not done.
Any more comments? Just as a matter of curiosity, how many people are property owners in the area? Majority. Okay. Well, we'll be talking to you.
Is there any possibility that we could, the scope seems very broad right now. And the broader the scope, sometimes the more difficult it is to manage it. You have the triple constraint issues, things like that. So, that being said, if this is really about revitalizing the town, which I don't think anybody's in disagreement with, we could use some of that. But if we could narrow the scope to be properties that are located within a certain corridor, particularly our Main Street. We have people that drive through every day. We don't necessarily look like an appealing town that, hey, I want to come live there. Combine that with, and I don't want to open up a political box here, but combine that with our school system, issues that we have. And, we have challenges that are contributing to the long-term success of the town and the growth of the town. If we're gonna start going out into other parts of the town, that might not be the biggest bang for the buck as far as, I'm driving through this town, I'm not really familiar with it, I drive through it every day maybe, to go home to beautiful Brookfield area, things like that. Shouldn't it be about, optimizing what's going on our current roads, on our existing roads, on our main roads that bring the traffic through, versus going too far deep into neighborhoods that maybe aren't going to, have the net benefit?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with
Just the scope seems very large.
You've hit on a point here that there is a specific target area, which Bill mentioned briefly at the beginning, and I could, Lisa's gonna show you this. That's the core of it. It's what's called the Spencer Census Designated Place. It's just downtown Spencer. In fact, there's a constraint on using these grant funds in areas that meet certain average income levels, and that's the area in Spencer that qualifies. So it's kind of, I don't have a large map here, but you can actually see it on the board over here. There's kind of a light red outline. Anybody have one that they
There's
can read?
also a map in the
There's
back.
one in the back there that
And
shows
I
it a
think
little
that's
better.
one of the handouts, is also the
Yeah.
same map.
So it's really the core of Spencer.
Right, okay.
It's not, I mean, it's a large enough neighborhood that, we're obviously.
But your point may be
It
that
is a concentrated area.
strategically, focusing on a small area to have the sort of beginning impact, to begin to start the ball rolling, may be very good.
And I would think that, definitely the area where the businesses are, I think would be a priority. I see there's several properties that are identified within a fairly small area from Lincoln Street down to the Mill Street area, according to this map. And then anything that's on, I would think, Route 31, which is, the Maple Street area also, again, major roadways coming into town. So, what about sustainability? We do this assessment, they come up with, funding, financing that's attractive enough for, homeowners, property owners to invest in it, but what about sustainability?
By sustainability, what do you mean?
Properties are always going to need to be maintained. So you invest in this, and if our resources don't meet the demand, where do we find that balance? Where does it become, what's the return on investment?
And again, that's sort of a property by property, owner by owner, situation by situation sort of thing that we hope to find out in the process of this study. There may be situations that are easily sustainable and others that are more difficult. And we'll hope to be able to sort of show you what the differences are.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about probability and impact. What's the risk assessment here? If you have, say, 2 houses out of 5 that are on a block on Maple Street, they're all willing to do this, but then you have several properties that are not willing to or capable of doing it. And then what happens if the financial situation for those homeowners, property owners, changes so that then they need to not be part of it? I mean, how are you gonna mitigate all that?
It's in a sort of supposition mode right now that I am very uncomfortable trying to answer. It'll depend, I think, is all I can say right now. Sure.
I think the goal is really to encourage private development in the real estate market and to identify those properties where, maybe through some changes in use or maybe with some minor support, would be feasible for real estate development. And, yeah, you can't, if there are 2 houses that participate
make an upgrade, that should have an overall positive impact on the neighborhood. And I think that's the goal. You can't, you really control what happens down the road to 100%, but the idea is to kind of reverse the disinvestment and try to get some new investment back, especially in the downtown, so.
Can I interject for one moment? I had a request that we get some names for the record. That young lady.
I'm not telling anybody who I am. I'm Susan Sweet Ostromecki. My husband's a dentist on.
Okay.
So, and I own property on Main Street that I revitalized myself, 83 Main Street. So, across from the gas station.
Thank you. Thank you.
To Susan's comments about sustainability, I get where she's coming from. We're in a room full of public policymakers, I being one of them, along with another member of the planning board, John Weiner here. And, yeah, I mean, we can throw the buzzword public-private partnership around a lot like we've been doing, but I think to her issue of sustainability and making good public policy, there should be more stars there for public forums. I think the more transparent this process becomes, the more realize of a sustainable project this might become. And that's just what I have to say.
Has there been an outreach to talk to businesses, especially on Route 9? Because as Susan's saying, the sustainability of any project is gonna be, is everyone gonna try to buy into it? And we've got one business in town, and everybody knows who I'm talking about. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's gonna be a real nightmare trying to get these people to do anything, and you can do anything you want. And I think this is a great idea. Do not get me wrong. I think this is a fantastic idea, and this is exactly what Spencer needs. But the outreach needs to be, now, I don't wanna say aggressive, but I think involving other businesses along the corridor, especially on Main Street, and we're talking right across from Price Chopper, you couldn't have missed it, big blue building, yellow, red signs. It's gonna be a fight, it's gonna be a brawl. That's gonna be, just so you folks know ahead of time, that's the linchpin to the downtown area, there's no question about it.
We have a lot of already beautiful buildings along that section, that people take a lot of pride in ownership. Dan's, the auto business, but it always looks immaculate. And he's always out there painting or planting something. So, it's pride of ownership, and what he does and what other businesses do to enhance, Main Street is, a wonderful thing. But if everybody isn't gonna get on the bandwagon, we are gonna have a challenge.
Could I ask what you think the good method of reaching out to that community is, to the business community in the town center? I mean, this is part of
I think understanding
the
what the
process here.
resistance is, go to root cause. Why are we resistant to what's being proposed? What's been proposed in the past? What's been recommended? What's been strongly recommended? What is the reason why there's resistance? And understanding that, and then, going from there to determine, all right, we understand, we hear what the concerns are, how do we proceed? How do we get to yes? Because really, that's what project management is all about. If anybody doesn't know, I'm a project manager too. I'm not only the dentist wife, but I'm also a project manager, so. Sorry, UMass already has me. But, I think we need to figure out how to get to yes.
Yeah. Right, and again, I said, not over till it's over, because there's all these factors that have to come together, and then finally, you think you've got the best view, and taking into account parking, people's attitudes about their property, people's resistance, and then all of the financial kinds of information and physical information you put together, and you come through with a package of properties and actions for them. But as Bill says, if we get 10 where the owner's willing to move quickly, we'll feel that it's a success, and that will probably be enough to swing the areas that they're in, back to positive territory rather than continued poor performance that we're getting now.
Hypothesis. Okay. If a business is resistant to making improvements because they're in fear of having their taxes raised, because I've added value to my building, so now my tax assessment's gonna go up, can it be part of the scope that that the town takes in consideration that, to not hike up a business's taxes, that does opt in for a revitalization? Because I have a feeling that that's part of the root cause of what's going on. People are always afraid of certain things that are gonna increase their taxes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the whole tax abatement process that can be applied, although you've got to watch out for favoritism and use of non-objective criteria when you're involved in an abatement process.
There are a number of tools that have been used to assuage that fear, and we'll be looking at those programs
Tools
and making
here, tools
tools in
other
other communities
Okay.
that have succeeded in doing that. And there's no reason why this town couldn't adopt some of those tools. Again, it needs to be on a sort of property by property basis, and that's the reason we're looking at property by property. But there are tools that have worked in other communities.
Yeah,
How in-depth of a title examination are we gonna be doing on all these properties? I see the potential of, property liens or deed restrictions being an obstacle in, any kind of change, proposed use in the future.
We'll have to take a look at some of that. We won't necessarily do it on all properties of the 60 or 50, but ones that we can identify as having some of those issues, either by people telling us that those issues have come up in the past, or other sources of information. I mean, I put registry of deeds on the sources of information because we do expect to look into that in some cases.
Susan brings up a good point. If there's, it's the carrot and stick theory, if you're gonna go and talk to businesses, you should have your ducks lined up ahead of time to say to businesses, this is what we're willing to do for you, because I think that's a really good point. If somebody puts money into a business, are my taxes gonna go up? So if there was like, not a TIF program like Worcester has, but, like you said, a tax abatement program, or say, for a certain amount of time, my taxes are not gonna raise for 3 to 5 years or whatever, to give them some kind of an incentive, then you could move forward saying to business owners, and they'd be a lot more receptive, I think. Because you're gonna meet some resistance, there's absolutely no question, but you guys know that, you've been doing this for a while. Sounds like this isn't your first time around the block. This is your first time in Spencer.
It's a new block every time.
I'm sure it is. This one's a view.
With the other project on Main Street, is it possible that we would be able to see what that project and what the vision may be for this project, how they dovetail together, so that if you're looking at a property change and a building coming down with parking, how that will flow with traffic flow, so that citizens can look at it and say, kind of anticipate whether or not there may be left turn, right turn challenges or anything like that going forward. Is that a potential that we could do with some of the GIS?
Well, we're certainly mapping everything together and taking, again, I think we're sort of in a supposition kind of mode here, and
Right.
If it makes sense to do that, we'll certainly do it.
I'm just saying, it would help a lot of people to understand where the vision may be going.
Yep.
So that people could look at it and say, if this changed to parking, then this would be the way that you go in and out and all that, and it would be much easier, or here's some of your challenges.
Yep, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, on a site-by-site basis, certainly a concept plan could be developed as to, where the traffic goes in, where the traffic goes out. But I should caution that this isn't a traffic study. We can't use the funds for this project.
No, I'm not talking about the
Traffic
funds.
counts or anything like that.
The idea is that if you know where Main Street is going, and if you're looking at which property may be needing rehab,
Sure.
then it tells you this will be a priority property going forward, where this one, it doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
really put a lot of
And
investment in.
those two maps can absolutely be overlaid so you can
Yeah.
see where the pieces fit together.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen Tyler, Utilities and Facilities Superintendent. I just want to add something, and correct me if any part of this is wrong, presenters. We put this meeting together on short notice. We all got together and gave them ideas and so forth. Really excited to see this many of people here at this meeting on such short notice. And I just wanted to add through what I heard tonight and some of the conversation, that this is a study, and it goes into a process. It's going to have recommendations all around. It's going to have recommendations to private property owners. It's going to have recommendations to the town. It's going to have recommendations to the select board. And then ultimately, it leads to dialogue and so forth. What I want to say to any owners out there or that get this information, if you're interested, please let these people know that you're interested and you want to get involved. Don't necessarily wait for them to contact you. The sooner you let them know, the better. And that's what we're looking for. The key is the owners, active and interested ownerships. And those people that are interested in trying to see what they can do with their property or give ideas, be part of the process, are very welcome. We would appreciate to hear from you.
This is sort of a Woody Allen moment. You showed up, so you're really important.
I'm assuming that the list, as the assessment is done, that the working list will be identified. Would it be possible that on that list of properties, the current status of those properties be identified? In other words, are they having, is it being taken over by the town? Is it in the process of being taken over by the town for tax purposes? Is it being held by a foreclosure company? You know, is it at risk of foreclosure? Just so that people understand, as the determinations are made on which property is gonna be invested in, it's out there on the table as to who owns them and who's going to benefit by the increased value of said properties.
Your assessor's records are available on the web, and it's a very complete assessor's inventory.
Of
And
the,
that-
of the properties targeted for
Of
this?
every property in town.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking. You have a list of 100 properties that you've identified. I don't think that each, person in this room should have to go hunt and peck. Let's have full disclosure and list the properties and what their current state is. Who owns them? Are they town-owned? Are they owned by somebody else, by a foreclosure company? Without having to have 40, 50 people in this room rework it, you
No.
know?
What I was saying is, that's a source for us that we're using. It's also available to everybody. We're not asking you to look at it. That's what we'll be coming back with as the inventory goes along, is that kind of information and a lot more.
You're asking for access to those 100 properties that are.
And what the current state is.
Yeah, if it's in foreclosure, even that, there's subcategories there. There might be a purchase and sale agreement that exists, in which case
Just
they're out in the bank.
asking for the list.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is the 100 list, that was for the purposes of the grant application. So that, as I mentioned, will be getting reduced down to 50 or 60. And I think once we have that initial list, even if we have the initial list of, say, 20-ish to really start on very soon, we can certainly ask Michelle to help post that on the website.
And just the criteria of, because somebody else asked this, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't see who it was. But, somebody asked, what's the criteria? How do you narrow it from the 100 down to the X number that ends up being in the final count?
Well, part of that is this meeting tonight, and I'd actually be interested in hearing from some of the residents and business owners here on your suggestions on properties that we should be focusing on.
But if we don't know the list of the properties, right? Does anybody know the list of the properties? Okay. If we
Yeah,
don't know
but
the
you
list
have
of
the general, the geographic area, and we're focusing on the town. Are there properties that you were
You're talking
interested
about that 100, if we can provide, maybe we should do it, since hard to do it kind of tonight. Maybe there should be a system set up where those 100 properties that were part of the grant application are made public, and then people could email in or something, recommendations off of that list or something,
Yeah,
right?
you know, it's a little Excel spreadsheet where you can send in and say, yes, yes, no, no, yes, 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 maybe, yes, yes, no, no. You know, because I personally would invest the time to take a drive around town and look at the properties and go, yes, for X reason, no for X reason, just maybe based on geography or, you know, what else is going on around that area. I just think that you'll get more feedback, the more information you give to people, to make them, you know, for people to just sit here and go, okay, well, yeah, I can recommend a couple properties, but you're not gonna get a comprehensive list and understanding of what the community looks, you know, expects from this. So that's just,
Yeah, the more local input, the better, no question about it.
I can work with Adam when he returns, and Michelle and the consulting team. The planning commission has a new website that has a comments feature, so perhaps we could even post a working list there, and people could add comments about, you know, other sites they'd like to see. We'll have to work out the mechanics.
Steve's always great about disseminating information, so I'm sure Steve would be happy to put it on his email distribution, isn't Steve?
No idea now.
See, when you do something well, you get nominated a lot, so.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we've owned property here for 53 years on the corner of Mechanic and Main Streets. We went through revitalization in mid-'80s, if I remember right. There was only a handful, I think, of businesses, business properties that cooperated with the group at the time they wanted mostly to restore and to bring the properties up. And at that time, the properties that a lot of people have mentioned this evening were a target at that time. This is in the mid-'80s now, and it was not accomplished. We did get revitalization for several downtown properties here. It was a very good process. I enjoyed it very much. I cooperated as much as I could. I even got involved in my building and remodeling, restoring to original appearance. And I stuck my neck out and got a loan, and which I was supposed to at the time, was supposed to get a reduced rate, but somehow or other in the shuffle, I did not end up getting a reduced rate. But I was in the hawk for around $40,000 back in the '80s, and which is a bit of money. But the project came out very, very good. There was two of us. There was one in one corner and one on the other corner, which the owner is here now this evening. And we tried as much as we could to help out, but I know she's trying to get more help than but you really have to, volunteer yourself into it. A business owner has to really get into it in order to be cooperating and get results. It's a shame, but this is the problem we've had in this Spencer here, is lack of cooperation. It's not, everybody comes up with a different idea, but nobody wants to bring it into one main formulating idea. So it's very interesting to watch what's being said here tonight. I'm not actively, my sons are actively involved in the building now. They have been pouring money into it like crazy. As a matter of fact, it's a losing proposition. As a matter of fact, we've got 2 empty stores there now, which we haven't been able to rent on the Mechanic Street side. And, you know, my sons have put in new heating systems, new roofs and so forth. And now they're in the process of tearing down the barn, which the insurance company was threatening to cancel our insurance due to a hazard. And it's been a trying situation, and with the outlook and business-wise in Spencer here, you know, I ran a business here in Spencer I was involved in a store, in a retail store, and it's discouraging to see that people, you know, some do try to support you, but many other people do not. There are many factors that enter the picture, I believe. Some of them are parking, others are, you know, it's individual stores, they find the prices too high. Then, of course, when I was in business, in the retail business, we had the fair come in and really cut our throats. And it made it very, very difficult. And finally, we did seize the business. The business that I was involved in was 3 generations. I was at the generation, and it was started in 1904, and I closed it in 1980. So it's, you know, I could see a lot of these people are trying to get all their wants of trying to revitalize the center of the town here. But I think you're gonna find it the hardest thing in the world. You're only gonna get, now if you get 50% cooperations of the businesses, you will be doing fantastic. Because I don't think we had that in the 80s. I don't think we had the 50%. I think we had less. And it's just that, I don't know, it's just, younger people are coming in here. It seems that they should be enthused about, you know, keeping the center of town looking good and revitalized, but it's kind of discouraging at times. I wish I could really be more involved, but I'm too far along in age here to get involved anymore.
And those towns that have been more successful in revitalizing themselves have generally had high-quality leadership on the part of maybe a few business people, or maybe even outside hired people. I mean, some towns get together and they form a business improvement district, a BID, they call it, and hire either full-time or part-time somebody whose job is to market. I mean, that's one of the jobs, is to market the businesses that are there, and also to help recruit other businesses that might be good matches for what you've got there. But the important thing is, number one, it's leadership, and number two, it's consistency. They're at it, you know, there's no gaps. They don't let things slip away. If they see an opportunity, they find a way to seize on it, and that's what it takes.
It's just like when she mentioned taxes, you know, nobody likes to pay taxes, and, but if you improve your property, you're gonna, and I'm talking about business property, if you improve it, you're gonna help your own business, and you'll be able to pay the taxes.
Yeah.
But some people can't understand that, I guess.
I do want to sort of reiterate some of the things that are in the downtown revitalization plan. That Spencer, I mean, I came to Spencer the first time 2 weeks ago. Maybe I've driven through on Route 9 before, but it's my first experience here. And you look around, I'm looking at the mural on the wall, you have some beautiful old buildings. You have a downtown that has residences nearby. You have the Price Chopper right downtown. You have a lot of things that people are looking for. People are looking for places where they can walk to shop, places where they can walk to work, places where they can walk and run into maybe their friends on the street. And Spencer has all of that. A lot of places are trying to create it. And, you know, I'm just saying that this is, it's not all bad. You've got some really good things going for the town. And, you know, it's just sort of focusing on those and maybe polishing them a little bit. And I'm an optimist. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I wasn't. But I can see Spencer being a really vibrant, great place to live. And it especially, I think, would be good for young families starting out and old families that are empty nesters that are looking for smaller places to live, going from 3 or 4 bedrooms down to 2. So I think there's lots of possibilities. Go ahead.
My name is Heidi Franke-Malone. I live here in town, not downtown. However, I think as a member of the community, we need to think in bigger terms than just one business. I can understand the gentleman that said that he was struggling. I understood like most of his life. However, I think we also have the beauty of different businesses. We have a lot of potential, and I would think, and to what you just said, attracting families, that I don't see right now with the problems that we have with the schools. So because I'm a citizen here and a property owner, I have a vested interest that the value of my property should stay the same or go up. And I don't have to be a business owner for that. So I do think it makes total sense to reach out to the business community, like Susan said before, the ones that are hard to engage, to reach out to them, to see the bigger picture, you know, that to at least what we have, try to keep the value. If we can't, you know, we are on a lot of things are looking down, going down, but I think what we have, we need to value, work on that, try to improve it just to keep the value that we have. I think that's very important, and not only for the business owners here in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
I do have a comment, and it follows somehow the question about what are the criteria and what is the process and what is the objective of this project. For the record, I'm Daniel Stroh. So what I would like to see is, you know, in that 100 list or 50 or 60, however they are, maybe there are 23 deckers, and then you go and kind of figure it out what the problem is and come up with something that is more comprehensive for the town. Maybe you look at, you know, some commercial buildings and you say, well, this seems to be the issue. Maybe the taxation, maybe, you know, some incentives, maybe financing is not there. Whatever, instead of taking 1, 2, 3 Main Street or, you know, whatever specific property and try to solve the issue with that property, maybe take a look at the bigger picture and see what can be done that would help in the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, that's a question of what properties get included in that list of 50 and 60. And what you're suggesting is that you use some criteria for overall favorable development of an area. And I don't see any reason why that can't be, but that's something for Adam and Michelle and Andrew to help us with. And it's possible, I mean, we'll certainly keep in mind the contribution of any given property to the area plan for itself, and its neighbors. And in some cases, that'll be better articulated than others. I mean, if you look at the downtown plan prepared by Cecil in 2009, they focused on your little pond area as an area for some special attention, and possible will, identify some properties that would contribute to that kind of sort of sub-objective of the downtown plan. But I think your basic point is be careful with how you select the properties, and don't overlook some that are likely to be key in making a contribution to the overall objectives of elevating and improving the town center. Thanks.
I just have another question. I live in town, I rent in town, and I'm fortunate enough to have a landlord that lives in town as well, or close by, that takes care of my property very well for me, and I don't have worries. What's gonna be the incentive for out-of-town owners of rental properties? Because unfortunately, they come in, they buy these properties very cheap, they do the minimum to be able to rent them out, and then they don't ever come around again. They don't see what as long as they get their rent money, they're happy. And it happens in a lot of smaller towns in Massachusetts, and in small towns all over the country, actually. So what's gonna be, how are you guys going to, approach these people? What's gonna be the incentive to give them a reason to want to, make our town look more beautiful when they live, out of city or out of state even? They get their rent, they pay the mortgage on the building, why do they care that downtown Spencer looks like?
Yeah, and, this is one of the biggest problems of areas like Spencer. I mean, it's a problem everywhere. And one of the approaches that I've seen lately that people have been taking is, right now, code enforcement is based on a complaint. If you have a complaint, you call the building inspector goes after your landlord. Okay? Another way of doing that is to have the inspections done whenever the renter turns over. And that way, the code inspector comes in every time the renter changes. Several towns are implementing that, and it's being a very successful way. A landlord who doesn't want to be bothered sells. A landlord who...
I don't know, like, for example, last weekend, we live right on Main Street, we walked over to the Catholic Church Festival, and walked right down Maple Street, starting right behind where the Cumberland Farms is. And these properties are run down, they're terrible, or they're completely abandoned. I don't know who owns them, who doesn't own them, but I'm thinking, if you glance down Maple Street, anybody driving by is gonna see that, and they're gonna think, personally, my personal thing is I look at it and I see crackfill. I don't know what else to call it, because that's what it looks like to me. And that doesn't bode well for a town that's trying to improve itself.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think there are some approaches that are meeting with some success in other communities that we could try.
Another device is to fine landlords for the complaints about the tenants. And some of the city of Boston has done this, and the fine is pretty stiff. It's like $300, and it's for each occurrence. I think it's $50 for the first occurrence and $300 for subsequent occurrences. But if you've got an unruly tenant who's continually causing problems, and the police have to come, like every Saturday night, pretty soon you get pretty deep into the landlord's pocket with those fines. And it's considered a pretty severe thing to do, but, if the problem is severe enough, maybe severe laws and procedures are the approach you should take.
And there are properties that are either vacant or partially vacant, and so there is incentive, there should be incentive to invest so that instead of having a partially vacant property, you can have a fully occupied property. So I think, the idea is.
Paradise.
Yeah, and how do you get, how do you generate market forces so that people are incentivized to invest? And it's not an easy answer, because if it was easy, then there wouldn't be the problem.
Yeah, 'cause you can't go to the owner's door or knock on their door, even if they live a town or two away, you can, but if they're 3 states away, you can't go knock on their door and say, hey, we have this incentive for you.
Well, but you certainly can reach out to them, it's not.
No, but if, for example, fines build up, you can put an actual lien on the property, which is done. It doesn't matter how many states away they live, they're still gonna get that reduction in the property value because of the liens.
Question back here?
I do, just looking for a clarification. Now, you submitted a list of 100 properties for the grant application. Now, those properties necessarily aren't your target, they're your idea properties, but your more target are owners that actually step forward and say, hey, come look at my property. Is that, will that be
Yeah.
2 different lists? There was one just for the submission of the grant and one that will actually be worked on?
So I can speak to the list that was on the grant application. So that was about 100 sites. And the idea there was to demonstrate to the State Department of Housing and Community Development that there were enough of these kinds of properties in downtown Spencer that there was a need here for this kind of, planning process to help kick off implementation to address some of the properties. But the amount of funding that we could get through the grant means that we can really only investigate the 50 to 60 of those in depth.
Right,
So-
those will be volunteer.
Well, it can
owners.
work both ways. It can be, the top-down one where we look at the data and really identify, hey, these, whatever number of properties, they're vacant, they're in tax arrears, they're all sorts of code violations. It can go that way, or it can go that someone here tonight says, hey, my neighbor or my property needs help. Can I be one of the properties that gets investigated through this planning process? So it can really go either way, but it's one list at the end. It'll be 50 to 60 properties.
Right, I understand that. But like the ones you talk about, maybe in tax arrears, now if that owner does not want to volunteer or get funding through a private-public partnership, then what do? You can't fix their property. You're not gonna, the town isn't gonna take on that responsibility of fixing a property for a homeowner that doesn't, or a property owner that doesn't wanna participate, correct?
Or we don't wanna reward bad behavior too, by saying, oh, if you don't pay your taxes, but here, have some
No,
money
but-
to fix up your property.
But maybe you try to find several properties that are in tax careers and market them and try to sell them.
So an auction process.
The tax arrears ones are sometimes easier than the ones
Right.
where people keep paying their taxes but do nothing to help the building. And at least if they're in tax arrears, the town has an option to potentially acquire the property and use either local funds or grant funds or private programs to get the property rehabilitated or redeveloped.
Look at that, it's just 8 o'clock. How did that happen?
I'm gonna give the board an opportunity to ask any questions real quick.
If I could, I'm sorry, the gentleman from Pioneerville, I didn't get your name.
Andrew Lowe.
Andrew, I'm having a hard time getting a firm grasp on the process, and I know it's very site-specific, and I suppose that there's lots of variations, but are there some case studies, some experiences you could relate from other towns that from whom you've written these grants and help develop this process, in starting with just, being a property on a list, you meet resistance, and somebody finds out their property's been cited because it looks like it needs a lot of work in there, and they're kind of taken aback by it. I mean, it seems like we could generate a lot of goodwill in this process, or you could really set up some fierce resistance on the part of property owners, depending how it's perceived. I mean, I'd be overly sensitive, but in as much as we're looking for volunteers and we're looking for people to be engaged, across the board in revitalizing our community, is there some experiences you can cite?
Yeah, I mean, I can, not a project that I managed, but a colleague of mine, Chris Dunphy, who I think has
Yes,
appeared before the board several times, he managed almost this identical planning process in the town of Ware last year, so he could speak to it a little better than I could. But one of the key things is to emphasize that this is a planning project. There's no implementation money in here. So if you're a property owner, and maybe you don't want to do anything new with your property, this is a plan. If you don't cooperate, the most we can do is gather the publicly available information about your property and make some recommendations about it. It doesn't mean that these things will happen. You own the property. You have to be on board for these things to happen, unless it's, you're so far arrears in taxes that maybe the town would consider taking the property. So I think if we emphasize that point, that tends to reduce the amount of resistance that property owners have to having their property included. And also, to some extent, this is public information already. It's the assessor's data, the tax lien status, that kind of stuff is all out there already in the public domain. So, whether or not they want to participate, we can already look, to that degree at their property.
So if a property owner is approached, based on some information you've collected, does someone, reach out to that person and say, what do you have in mind for your property, or?
Yeah, and that's partly why we're here tonight, and partly why we're gonna have at least a couple more public forums, is to try to get buy-in from the owners, so that, the implementation recommendations that come out of the study actually have a chance of happening. If you don't have buy-in from the owner, it's not gonna happen. So that is something that we wanna do, and because we'll be looking at this at a relatively small list of sites, 50 to 60, we do intend to contact all the owners directly as we get towards that implementation stage.
There's not money for implementation, but there's money to sit down with, someone, put together a financial route that you take to moving the property?
This would, it's not like we can fill out a loan application for them, but certainly I think the consulting team can lay out specific types of interventions that would be, optional for the property owner, and even a bit of a timeline as to, which order things go in and how long they might take to accomplish there.
And that might carry on beyond the end?
Yeah, and also, this being a grant-funded project, I tend to look at this as the starting point for seeking additional grant funding to do some of the implementations that get recommended through this study. So perhaps it is a facade improvement program, which has been mentioned a couple times tonight. Again, it could be seeking more of the housing rehabilitation funding that the town has had the last several years to help with residential and mixed-use properties. So that, specific implementation actions may come out of this, but they're not a part of this planning project.
The concern I have is, if people who've watched this and folks have additional questions they have after this, can we funnel those to you, Michelle? Funnel them to, so if you have additional questions, comments, recommendations, funnel them to Michelle Buck, our town planner, and Adam. I can send Adam the information as well. But I think you've got some interesting takeaways here. You heard about the main street corridor. You've heard about business outreach. You've got a request to organize the properties that we're talking about, and I'm hearing profiling them in some generic way, so people can give input as to what they think are properties worth looking at. Now, where the town can assist you, those will be in your recommendations as well. You mentioned some kind of inspection process that those will be in recommendations that we can look at and move forward with if we'd like. Okay. We got a lot of good information. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. This is well attended on short notice. Anyone else on the board have anything to say?
The only thing I want to say is that, good points, both Susan, Bobby. We talked about it. It's funny, because when I was a kid, the A&P used to be right in the center of town. There used to be a big parking lot behind it. So, this has been ongoing since Almost Columbus was a cabin boy. That being said, with us doing Mechanic Street, the next project, and that's a big, for us, I think it's a big deal, walking traffic, being able to get everything open. You know, some of the highlights, so I gotta tell you guys, is, you know, finally Kelly's did a heck of a good job redoing her property, Maze Nails, what you did with the two-family up on the hill. I mean, and Danny, what you did with the front of yours. So those things take notice. How do you force somebody beside you to take notice and maybe they do it? I don't really know the answer to that. I can tell you, though, is when we look at Mechanic Street, Lamoureux's old furniture building, which was gonna be a restaurant, and because of funding, and as that fell through, 10 Cherry Street burnt down. I lost a good friend of mine in that fire. Perfect spot for a parking lot, for foot traffic. So as we look through this, we look through all of that to get up to Chestnut Street, and maybe, if those of you who remember the bar rooms up there, the old Frank and Pete's that's boarded up on the corner of Temple Street. So as we reach out and we look at the other property that burnt on Chestnut Street between the other two bar rooms, I can't think of the name of them, but that being said.
Wedges?
Yeah.
Wedges.
But, you know, that being said, there's so much opportunity here that if we get, and this is a great forum because people come out, Billy, where Caboodles was, that used to be Fannis when I was a kid, a clothing store. So Billy upgraded his property to make it stand out. And as we do that, the hope is that if you look at the town of Ware that Andy mentioned, the changeover in that town, you go down the main street in Southbridge and you look at that and the transformation coming through and how in-depth that got and how it's a pleasure to walk the street, really, because you feel comfortable and people are talking on the street corners, and I get that part of it. You know, and the last thing we want to see is if you ever been out there or go on the computer and look, 8 Mile Road in Detroit, if you ever hear of it, because there's a show on TV, one of the pawn shops that they have.
Core pawn.
You know, there's what not taking care of property, and as it becomes drawn down and dragged down, and it turns into vacant buildings that are set on fire. So, I mean, we're looking at trying to get people involved in how do you revitalize what you have. Part of the downtown revitalization is so important to us. So that's why when we get these grants, grants only mean you can do the study. So as we progress and as they do their homework, hopefully, you know, we find funding, and that's what the job is maybe there's some banks that want to jump on board and get involved. You know, the one thing I'll say is as far as businesses in these towns, we have a single tax rate. We do whatever we can to keep business here and try to draw in more. But you can't force somebody to go to the trough and drink. You just can't. As much as we all like to, believe me. You know, some days, I don't know, some days you just get frustrated. But the import of this crowd, I think, is so important to this town and so important to what these guys are trying to do, that please don't give up, stay with it, because the more voices are heard, the more power we get, and as we get more grants come down the lines, I mean, we're hoping, you know, I mean, we got handicap issues on Main Street, let's face it. I mean, you couldn't, you know, so there's so much ahead of us, but unless we start somewhere and at least lay the groundwork, nothing's gonna happen. So I thank everybody for their input. I think it's that important to us. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if property owners want to contact, is there a point of contact that we could put out there?
Yeah, we'd like to point him towards Michelle Buck as the primary contact with issues regarding this revitalization project.
And who's the project manager here?
I am, yeah.
So we could feed you also.
Yeah, we can feed you whatever comes in, just.
So Brian, we could feed you somehow.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I also think, as we've been talking here, when you do your outreach to the businesses, integrating what else is going on as far as projects in town to try to sell the idea of you know, let them know we have a project on Main Street going on that's worth your while to, you know, do facade work or whatever. So that's another, I think, key component to success.
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate coming out. We appreciate everyone coming out. It was well attended, again, on short notice. Thank you so much. You know, send your feedback to us, to Michelle, additional questions, and we'll hopefully have that spreadsheet of these properties out in short order on our website. And we'll announce that at a future meeting as to when that's available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, we appreciate it.
I'll close the public hearing at 8:10. Thank you, gentlemen.